Hello, everyone, and welcome back to your favorite St. Louis sports podcast, the Lounatics. I'm your host, Tyler Edwards. The rude person interrupting my intro with his opening of a beer is my co-host, John. John, how are you doing this evening? And to start things off, what are you drinking since you're opening it loudly in front of us?
Okay, first off, I have opened a beer in the middle of your intro, like every single episode since November. And I don't think you've started complaining about it until Kaler was on board to talk about Birmingham. Before
I
that,
actually
I
don't
don't
know
think.
when it was. I
Yeah,
don't know that I honestly heard it before. I think you're just opening it closer to your mic now.
maybe,
so,
maybe.
so it's just more
Well,
obvious.
and it could be like the glass, like the glass breaking, right? The first time you
Mm-hmm.
notice like an annoying habit of someone's, it's like you notice it every single time after
Oh,
that.
God, yeah.
It 100% could be that. As far as what I'm drinking, it is a sad night for me, but it might end up a good night if we talk long enough because this one tends to hit me hard. It is my very last Train of Four Deep Sleep Brewing Stout, Imperial Stout, 8.1% alcohol per volume. And I just, ran nonstop for 40 minutes and sweated out everything. So we're going to see
Sounds
how
like
well
you
this
guys could have
hits.
used a sub tonight.
I convinced there's a girl that I know you would recognize from playing against her, but I convinced this girl to play with us tonight, so that way we at least had 6 people in the field. And I thought I was fit, and then this girl played the game ahead of us, played nonstop our entire game, and then went straight into playing the game after us for her other team. And I no longer feel like I'm a fit person. So anyway, my
Yeah.
life's going great. How are you?
Well, I'm in a good place. Got home,
What are you drinking?
played with the kids, and didn't go play soccer tonight because I was working on NBA homework. So this evening, I'm also going the stout route, is what I'm going to call it.
Ooh, I like that. That could be
Yeah.
like our catch line, the stout route.
But
Yes.
I have the Mexican chocolate stout from Schlafly, which I am enjoying thoroughly over here. Um, but yeah, no, I mean
Thoroughly.
it's a solid beer, and as you can tell in the glass, it's nice and dark, just how I like it.
There's a lot
What?
I could say with that, but I'm just gonna.
What'd you say? What was that?
I didn't say anything.
No?
I just
What?
said I'm not gonna say anything about that. But where's my sticky note at?
So,
Doesn't matter.
talking about St. Louis sports, it probably also didn't help. I don't know how much sleep you got last night, but I got home and was still a little amped after the St. Louis City game. Did not sleep well. Shout out to City winning, but we'll have another episode to go more in depth into that, focus more on City. But we just did a whole season preview, so we want to talk more about the Blues and Cardinals. And the first thing that I have on our outline to talk about, because we have those sometimes, is
We
Blues.
do. This is a short Tyler outline tonight. I want the world to know. This one is all Tyler. So I'm just along for the ride, and we're gonna see where it takes us. He's my designated driver tonight.
When Tyler takes you on a trip, you never know when you're going to end up. It's kind of like, I've this old saying on ketamine, right? Down the K-hole you go, where you land, nobody knows.
Fucking ketamine. Hey, and you know what though? Where'd my can go? The brewery is called Deep Sleep Brewing. So, and they're local,
Yeah.
Washington, Missouri. Gonna have to go find more.
It's
All my
probably
beers are local.
they're probably all their alcohol percentages are like 8 to 15%.
they
That's
have
why
to
it's
be.
deep sleep.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And they have to. I mean, they obviously have someone associated with the medical field to come up with such a deep name as Train of Four. Like,
Oh yeah.
I was mad impressed. That was an impulse buy. Anyway, Blues.
Blues. We'll start off with the lighter topic. Lighter for you, less light for me. Since the All-Star break, as we all know, we looked like we were getting hot leading into the All-Star break. Then we lost that last game to Columbus right before the All-Star break, which is a letdown. Ended that win streak and all of the good feels and kind of left a sour taste in our mouths. Came back, won 2 out of 3 on the road trip, and then have lost the last 2 at home. to Nashville and Toronto. So 2-3 since the break. Sitting at 60 points. We are tied with the Predators, with still do have a game in hand on them at 60 points for that second wild card spot. Sad news for me right now. We are on an 89.5 point pace that I sent you.
is what you sent me. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean,
it was
okay,
technically
that's
89.45, whatever,
right.
and I rounded up.
Yeah,
So
rounding. Yeah.
math nerds,
Naturally. Fucking nerds are ruining sports everywhere. Give me all the digits. Hey, Tyler, how many of those were significant digits?
Which, well, it depends, because I really none of them, but you didn't need them. But it's another thing. We're not going to get into sig figs.
We're not going to get into deep math here. We're a sports pod, not a math pod. Okay, so 60 points, 55 games, 89.5 for the pace. That would put them 3 points below the cutoff for our over-under, which means I've got beer in my future. May have made another bet today, which we will maybe, if it's real, be posting about soon with our good friend Jacob.
If you're talking about the one where no matter who wins, I lose, that's not happening.
That is 100% what's happening.
No.
So, but we'll get some more in that little teaser.
How much discretionary income to buy everyone else beer do you think I have?
You're rich. Look at all the alcohol behind you. Just start buying beer instead of whiskey. You'll cover it. Last week you were like, oh yeah, look, here I am, Mr. Fancy Pants, drinking my Blantons. Buy beer instead of Blantons.
There's not a bottle of Blantons behind me. I haven't had a bottle of Blantons in 2 years.
What did you have? You had something. Doesn't matter. Either way, I win.
I mean, you can see all of my bottles behind me.
Yeah, but it's blurry because Riverside is, doing its thing. I can't see what's all there. I'll have to watch it later, and then I have to listen to the sound of my own voice. Not a fan of that. So,
it just kind of sucks.
Yeah. And if you're listening to this right now, power to you, because, why?
You know what? We are on an absolute tear. The thing is, as Kaylor so kindly put it, if you're still listening to our podcast at this point, it means you like it, you sickos.
You sickos. I love that guy.
I'm just ready for another episode with Kaylor. More importantly,
Catel's a real pro.
So
Blues.
Getting back into the Blues. So we are tied with the Predators right now, which is actually disappointing to me. So going into the game over the weekend against the Predators, we were up. We had a 4-point lead on them with a game in hand and a chance to really put them in a hole, right?
Mm-hmm.
4-point swing on that game, and we did not do any of what we're looking for, right? We came out, we played flat. We looked okay for the first period. I say okay loosely. I mean, it wasn't terrible, but we let that game get away from us. And, now we're sitting here tied with them for that last wild card spot. If you win that game, all of a sudden you're talking about, okay, are we going to be buyers at the deadline? Things like that. It changes the outlook of the team with that 6-point cushion. Again, now we're tied. What do we do? And, it's hard to watch, hard to see, difficult to kind of, swallow at times, right? When every time we think this Blues team is starting to turn the corner, it comes back, and are we seeing the same Blues that we saw from earlier in the season, right? Are we still, at what point do we see some of the Blues get more consistent, right? Consistent effort. And that's the part that gets me, I know you haven't seen a lot of games, but.
Well, no, but here's the thing, right? The Blues just are who the Blues are. So this inconsistent effort that we're seeing, these inconsistent results, I think that's just who they are. I think they're an up and down team. I think that they have, every team's going to have good days and bad days, but the thing that separates the good teams from the rest of the world in any sport is that on a good team's bad day, they still find a way to pull out a W, right? And the Blues do not have that ability in the current iteration, and that's fine, right? This is a team that could get the last spot in the playoffs, but they're not a good team. I like the fact that they're in a playoff spot. I think says more about the rest of the conference than it does about the Blues.
I think it says more about our goalies than anything.
Yeah, yeah, okay, I'd
Our
buy that.
goalies have stolen a lot of games for us this year. And, you know, because of that, if you get into the playoffs, you're not somebody the other teams want to play because a goalie can steal a series,
Yeah,
right? The Blues can have a few off games, and if Benner's hot, he'll take the series. And
yeah,
that's not so that's not a team you want to play in the playoffs. Not because they are consistent, right? Because if you get
right.
the firing all cylinders Blues for a game or two, and then Benner steals a game or two, now you've lost the series and you're sent home packing when realistically you were the better, more consistent team all season.
Right. Well, in playoffs, in all the
Playoffs.
sports, playoffs, it's always about who gets hot at the end of the year, right? You see it year in, year out for every team. Whichever team figures it out in the last 2 weeks of the season and goes on that just crazy streak, they tend to ride that through, you know? Whereas most of the time, any teams that are, limping into the playoffs, or if they clinch way too early and have nothing to play for, those teams tend to do bad because it's really hard to turn it back on, right?
A
So,
good example of that, right? If you follow MLS last year, Sporting Kansas came in
right,
red hot, took it to St. Louis City in the
yeah,
first round as the lower seed. But then they had the big international break, and they couldn't
yeah,
turn it back on.
yeah. Well, and we've seen it also with the Cardinals for several times. Not maybe the last year they were in the playoffs, but several times since that last World Series run, we were a good team and we locked it down early. And the last week or so, we didn't really have a whole lot to do, you know? And at that point, it's just like, how do you keep that edge? Now, good news for the
Look at the
Blues.
last two World Series teams that the Cardinals
Yeah,
won with.
yeah,
They were the worst record in the playoffs in the National League both times.
yeah, yeah,
So even though they won the division in '06,
right,
they were actually worse record than the wild card team.
right, right. And that is, how do you say, kind of a trend of the last 20 years of the St. Louis Cardinals. And you and I have complained about that a lot. I know we're going to talk about Cardinals spring training in a bit, but and I think it's kind of the same thing with the Blues this year. Everyone can see the weaknesses in both of these teams, and yet they don't really make the moves that they need to improve the areas that they're weak. And it's not the team's fault that the team is not that great. It's the GM's fault for both teams that they're not going out to try to make the changes that they need to make. And that could be ownership, right? There could be financial limitations on what they're able and willing to spend. And even though we know that we're not like the biggest spenders, like for the Cardinals, um, you know, Mo only can only spend whatever DeWitt says like he can spend, right? He may be
Yeah,
right at the top of whatever that is, and we don't know. We have no idea what
yeah.
that is.
And Army's dealing with salary cap, right?
Right, right. And if you miss on some big contracts, and I know we've talked a lot about, Kyrou's contract in particular, that's a lot of cap space right there. It's hard when you get things wrong. And you see it in MLS too. We haven't had this issue yet because I think our management there is a little bit more strict with managing the cap and making good choices. And of course, being such a global game, the talent pool is massive to pull from.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you see some of the other teams, they make a couple of bad signings, and because of the cap hit, it just screws you. And that's part of why I find salary caps to be a more interesting way to manage leagues than the non-cap leagues or even soft caps. Um, all that to say, like, yes, if this team gets really hot the last month of the season, they could go on a tear, but they're going to be the lowest seed in the playoffs, which means they're going to have a hard road to do anything.
I agree. Again, I think it's at this point successful season for them where they're sitting is going to be making the playoffs. And again,
Yeah.
I think they have the potential to steal a series, but they're not going to win the
Yeah.
cup.
So let me ask you this. I know we have the outline and we've gone off of it, but the way you just said that, so would you consider making the playoffs and crashing out first round a successful season for the Blues? Because I did not have this
Hmm.
as a playoff team, right?
I,
So that I
I
would
I
consider it
told you at the
exceeding.
beginning of the year, a good season I felt like would be 93 points and competing for one of the last playoff spots,
Right.
competing for the playoffs through the end of the
Right.
season.
I mean, I thought they'd be close, but I kind of thought that they'd be a 90 point, an 87 to 90 point team, which is what they're on track for. So I feel really smart about that so far, but that they'd be just below the playoff line. And that could still happen, right? That's not, they don't have a huge margin of error. It's not comfortable for them, but I kind of thought that those wild card spots would have a few more points than they do.
I still
But
think they might because I think, and that's just it, right? We're 55 games in,
2/3 of the
56,
season, roughly.
56 games, right? For
The Predators
some
have
teams,
56.
but yeah,
Yeah.
for some teams, but for
Yeah.
us, right? We've got 27 games
Yeah.
to figure it out. I mean, we are almost exactly 2/3 of the season. When you said 2/3, I mean, right on.
Yeah. Right on. Yeah.
And we've got March 8th, that Friday is the trade deadline. So we've got, 2.5 weeks to the trade deadline. So you start wondering what are we going to do? What is that going to look like? And I'm curious to see what that looks like. I think, so I watched the Toronto game Monday. And while watching the game, there was times we looked like a really good team for little stretches, but I swear to God, the inability for our team to get aggressive on the forecheck, it is maddening. We're dumping pucks in, and we have like our forwards. We only have a couple of forwards who are willing to really get physical, and it's like our fourth line guys, right? The guys you
Right.
expect to be physical, but like
Right.
our first two lines were I mean, absolutely invisible on the forecheck. And if you're not getting out if you're dumping pucks into the offensive zone, it doesn't matter unless you're on the forecheck. I will say, right, power play wise and things like our power play looked good, and it has looked good since things have changed over. The other thing I keep seeing is just it looks like sloppy, careless maneuvers. I watched 3 different times where a pass comes to Kyrou, and this was in a span of like 5 minutes of game time. There are 3 different passes come to Kyrou, and it either hits his stick, and he just lazily like bumps it and then just kind of gives it away, and they go on a fast break, or he gets it, starts to make a move, loses the puck because he's just lazily doing whatever. And then the third one was he gets the puck, turns around, and literally passed it right to the Maple Leafs player. And I'm like, and he's just literally looked like he's just not even in it. I get it.
Well, well, okay. I mean, here's the thing about Kairu, and we talk a lot like these are professional athletes, and normally when you hear the phrase "this is a professional athlete," your thought is, okay, this person is like in peak physical shape. That's the first thing I think of when someone says they are a professional athlete, right? But the other
Mm-hmm.
part of that is the fact that you have to approach your job like a professional. And so, like for Kairu, like I get it. He's taken a lot of flack this season. I get it. The whole thing with Berube leaving, like especially, took him some stuff. But like, if you want your next team to want you, if you like aren't happy playing here, and which I totally get for him if that's how he feels, like you have to be showing something, and I don't think he's really been showing nearly what he should, or what he could, and what we need from him. We just spent this whole long talk about the importance of cap space, specifically with regards to him. He's too, just because by the nature of his cap hit, he is a critical, important piece for this team. And if he's not, bought in, like we need to move him on, and we may not be able to move him on because he is not interested in playing right now. Really, it seems like.
Yeah, it's been. I know I've talked a lot on this early in the season about his lack of a two-way game, but he doesn't even seem at times right now to care on offense. And if your game is predicated on literally offensive production, and you just look like you don't care, I mean, then you have no value, right? And that's the problem is, I would love to move on from him, but what do you do? How do you move on?
Right. Right.
And because the cap, right, we gave him, he's getting 8 mil a year. He's not going anywhere because we can't do anything with him and nobody else wants him. Um, and I think that's what's frustrating to me is when you see stuff like that, it makes you wonder, like, okay, well then what is this team's true ceiling, right? And how are you going to look at it? And that's kind of what I asking, and I mistyped this in the outline, so bear with me. But like, what does this mean headed into the trade deadline? Right?
Well,
If
okay.
that's the effort you're seeing from your star players, and you're still just moving around, and you keep talking about retooling, do you start looking to sell, or do you want to stand pat? And some of the things that there's a lot of pieces to consider when looking at that. Um, but what does that look like?
So here's my view. This has always been my view. If you are in position to be fighting for a playoff spot or a division or a conference championship or whatever the league does, you should be buying at the deadline. However, or at least not selling. You should not be selling at the deadline if you have a chance of the postseason, because the only thing that really matters about the postseason is getting into it, right? You've got to get into it to have a chance. Now, if you get, a phenomenal deal, that's sure, maybe, but there's no guarantee that the next 1, 2, 3 years are going to pan out, right? Guys get hurt. Guys decide that, hockey's kind of a physical sport, and I kind of am tired of hurting all the damn time, right? Like, and maybe they retire, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, if you're in position, like, you should always be buying now. The other thing, though, is the person who I at least have heard to be the most likely piece to sell at the deadline would be Bushnevich, who I'm not a fan of losing Bushy. I think he's been one of the top performers for the team this year. He gets a lot of minutes. Like he's really been a strong, consistent performer. He's got 43 points this year. Kyrou has 43 points, right? And they're tied for second on the team, but still, like, no, I think we should keep them. In terms of the Blues being buyers, though, like, everyone knows they're not a good team. If they were to suddenly be like, I want to be a buyer, like, teams would just fleece them, and we would get probably not a lot back because we don't have a lot of good leverage to make good trades. Then again, it is the NHL. So my previous point about how, like, the playoffs are not guaranteed, like, they let, like, a ridiculous amount of teams into the playoffs.
I mean, so does everybody now. Tell me a league that doesn't now.
They all copied the NBA and the NHL for this. And I really don't. I'm really torn on it.
So
right?
the NHL, you get 16 teams in, and is there 32? I think there's 32 now with Kraken.
There's
joining.
32 now. Yeah, the Kraken
So
were the 32nd team. This actually came up on an earlier pod, that 32 teams now. And I think that's fine. I think half the league is fine. There's actually, so with MLS's expansion last year and MLB's expansion, I have read a lot about, like, what's the average number of playoff teams, and I believe the NBA leads with like 2/3 of the teams, roughly 62% of the teams roughly make the playoffs, I think. And most of the teams are between 50 and 62. Baseball before this was at like 46, because baseball has historically been a very few teams make the playoffs structure. I gotta admit, though, like I get what people say, like, that the playoffs are more interesting, so you want to have more, like, games in it, and you want more teams in it so that more people are looking into it. And maybe I've been spoiled because I've been a fan of teams that are consistently in the playoffs, right? Like, but I'm like, no, that's bullshit. Be better. I don't know. Like the
Yeah.
regular season matters to me. Like I want to watch sports.
I get what you're saying. It's at the end of the day, these leagues exist to make money, and so by the playoffs mean more money. So more teams to playoff means more money, and so that's exactly why it is what it is. So I mean, you're not going to get rid of that, uh, but with that, right? I don't expect the Blues to be buyers. If they're buyers at all, I could see them potentially just a kind of a filler piece, right? Just a depth piece.
Yeah.
If they're not having to spend much. I know you're like, oh, they don't really have much leverage. I mean, we have some really solid prospects right now.
No,
Flip side of
that's
that,
what I mean.
I don't
We don't have
want them,
negotiation leverage, right? That's what I mean.
but
like
I don't want to see them give up those prospects, right? Exactly.
Right.
And
we wouldn't be able to get good returns without giving up good prospects who we want to
and
keep.
when you're in a retool or rebuild, however you want to phrase it, again, that's key. Bucci, his name keeps coming up in trade rumors and things. I don't think he's going to get traded. I know why he's looking at that. Same reasons you said. He is easily our all around offensive player. He's been a little inconsistent as late as far as getting some points on the board, but I mean, you're talking about a guy who can play the penalty kill, can play the power play. He plays top 3 minutes and plays them well. He's going to be a guy that will always be attractive, and because we are borderline, it's going to be teams are going to call and ask. And again, if we get some ridiculous offer, I do think he could go if Army gets one of those impossible turn down types offers, but I just don't see it happening. He has 1 year left on his contract. So he's 28 now. He'll play next season at 29, and he's signing his next contract going into his age 30 season. And with his production, you're likely looking at a $7 to $8 million a year player. Hell, Kevin Hayes makes $7.5 million a year.
Yeah,
we only pay half of that salary. So like, that's okay. It makes it much more palpable, right? So like palatable, but like, but it's, and again, Kevin Hayes is, as of late, has really played really well. Hell, the game on against the Toronto on Monday, I mean, he looked like one of the better players on the ice for most of the game. So like, Kevin Hayes has come on as late, and he does know how to play, and he knows how to win. And I think he, on his current line, playing with some different guys and being able to kind of stabilize being the stabilizing force for those guys is in a good spot. Right. But he's not a top 6 player, but he was getting paid like one because of what he did on the teams he was on with the players he was surrounded by.
Right. The other thing too, though, about Bushi, and this is the thing where we have to decide, are we in a rebuild or a retool, right? If we're in a retool, I think you, like, without the playoffs, right, you would want to keep him. If you are in a rebuild, clearly he's one of our most saleable assets, and he will soon have zero value when he hits free agency.
I think the Blues ownership group looks at what happened in 06, 07, 08 and knows that this team cannot afford to do that again, and they can't do that again with the fan base. Yeah. So it will be more of a retool than a rebuild, because they know they can't afford to go through a full-scale rebuild again.
Right. One of the things I need to look into, and I just don't know, I guess, where to look. I mean, Google will I'll find it as soon as I type it in.
Yeah, the interwebs is a good place to start.
The interwebs. You can find anything out there. But like for baseball, there's so many prospect lists for MLB, and they almost always have a like projected date, right, of when like a prospect will make it. And I need to look into, for myself and for my own knowledge, like how far away are these guys from making it to the NHL? That's one of the things that I think is critical for the context of where the Blues are and where we're headed. Because like our prospects are really good, but how many of them are likely to be contributors next year or within the next 2 years?
I think we see 2, maybe 3 in the next year and a half. if you didn't catch in the news, so Justin Falk was placed on long-term injured reserve, and
Right.
we've called up Zach Bolduc, which is one of those young guys we keep talking about.
That's true. That's true. I forgot all
This
about
year
that.
in the AHL, he has played in 48 games, has 23 points, 8 goals, 15 assists. Has not just
bad.
quote unquote torn it up. Because I mean, like you look at like where he was at previously. I mean, and again, completely different levels. Right now, he's playing against grown men now in the AHL, and was not so much before. But I mean, his previous seasons, he's anywhere from 1.5 or more for the last couple seasons prior to that on his stat line. So I mean, like he's a guy who can play. He's got good stuff. I'm excited to see what he does. But because of that move to long-term injured reserve, I think it's interesting to see him called up because we are still competing for the playoffs, right? You would expect. I would have expected potentially somebody who maybe had more professional time, right, to kind of help fill in and stabilize. But I also think it's a great opportunity to see what we have and see where Bolduc's at. He could make a big change, and he could make a big impact, and could easily earn that spot. I think we see Snuggerud before the end of next season for sure. I know a lot of people think we're going to see him this year. And Cardinals and baseball fans will love this, but the clock's going to be ticking, right? Once you call them up,
Right.
the clock's ticking, and you've got to figure it out. I could see them not calling up Snuggerud this year, but that's still to be determined. The other thing with the Falk on long-term injury reserve, I say other things. Marco Scandella, on one of our defensemen, has been also very rumored person to be traded, big talk, and was somebody that I honestly thought if we were going to like sell anybody, might be somebody we'd sell because a contender would be looking for a good defenseman like Scandella. I don't see us trading him now because of Falk being on long-term injured reserve, right? We don't have the defenseman depth to stay competitive at the level we're at if we trade him. So I think that likely takes him off the table. I don't know what you think there on how that would impact it.
Okay, so defenseman is one of the areas that this team is weakest. In fact, it is the area that this team is weakest. So on the one hand, I can see that. How old is Scandella? Do you know?
No, I don't know off the top of my head. He's
I'm
not
clicking.
old. He's not young either. Honestly, our
He
defenseman
is
looked pretty solid.
No,
he's looked solid as of recent.
He's older than us. So I mean, he is at the backstage of his career. I mean, if there's a team that wants him and we can get a couple of good young prospects, especially if they are young defenseman prospects, that like I'm okay with that. He is one of the things that's kind of interesting about Scandella. So he's actually one of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He's one of 7 guys out of 27 that like qualify for the skating stats. He's one of 7 guys with a positive plus minus on the team. And by the way, there are 7 guys with a positive plus minus. This team has a negative goal differential, negative 10 goal differential. Again, I'm going to reiterate this. This is not a good team. Now, they are pulling out some close games, okay? But the games they lose, they are getting just obliterated, right? Now, in a playoff series, win 4 close games, get blown out in 2 or 3 games. I'll take 4 close wins for $500, Alec. That's okay.
No, I get that. I think it's I think it's more telling when you watch the team play, right? Like, cause I don't feel like you're saying defenseman is our weakest area, and I'm watching these games, and I don't feel like it is.
Do you feel like
it's our? I feel like the defense that our forward groups are that are for example, you've got your center and your 2 wingers. The defense those guys are playing is god awful.
Well, okay.
But I don't feel like our defensemen
on one individual
line,
or do you mean first line to fourth line? Because I think we are
first line to fourth line has not looked terrible. I mean, Colton Parayko has been easily one of
Colton
the best
Parayko's
defensemen
been
in the league.
stud.
Nick Leddy has
Great
been
season.
phenomenal.
Great
Since the
season
first of
out
the
of
year,
Parayko.
Torrey Krug has looked like a new man, and has been playing out of his mind as a whole. Now, again, the plus minus may not support it, but you also have to think about the plus minus also is reflective of who's playing defense with him. It's not just your blue line there.
Right. So who is Krug being paired up with then? Right.
God damn it. And I knew you were going to ask that.
I'm very good at asking questions, especially ones that I don't know the answer to, because I haven't been able to watch a lot of games lately. So the thing about Krug is, okay, first off, he has 29 points, which is awesome. Awesome.
I mean, five of those came in one game.
That doesn't matter. You're getting, like, he still has 29 points. Like, that's like forward level production.
So it had been Justin Falk. So that's why I was like, hold on, you're going to give me a minute. They've been pairing up a lot with Kessel recently. And Kessel's played really well. And then I've seen a lot of Scandella, Tyler Tucker, Perunovic is also on IR still.
Sure.
But I mean, if you have four solid defensemen, which we do, at least as of late, but they haven't been the problem. And Kevin Falk is a absolute monster when he's on and playing well. So, there's a lot to take in there. So, but watching the games, like I said, the defensemen have looked pretty decent as a whole, right? They've not looked terrible, but the defense that at times our forwards are playing has looked terrible to me. And it leaves our defensemen out to dry and puts them, it's hard to play defense when you're constantly
when your forwards are not participating two ways.
When it's 3-2 on your defenseman or 4-2 on your defenseman,
right.
Yeah, it's going to look really shitty on you. But,
right.
Like I said, Colton Parayko has taken his game to another level finally this year, the level that we've been waiting for the last couple of years.
Sure.
And so I think that's important to consider.
God, he's a big guy. I always forget how big he is.
The other thing with Falk going on long-term injured reserve is Falk was actually seen skating this week, yesterday or today with the team. So which tells me he's getting closer to being at least able to return potentially. But if you put somebody on long-term injured reserve, you actually recoup some money towards the cap. So does that mean that they are looking to maybe add a depth piece? Again, I'm not saying that they're going to go out and trade for a top-of-the-line type person, but a depth piece is a reasonable ask. And are they going to potentially trade for a depth piece? Are they going to look to add second or third line defenseman, to kind of replace Scandella? That's more of a prospect that hasn't fully developed. Maybe
Scandella is not a prospect.
I said to replace Scandella, but you have to replace his spot on the ice, though, John.
Oh, I don't care. Well, I'm not disputing that, but you just said replace Scandella, a prospect who has not developed. He's literally the oldest guy on the team.
No. I said, do you look to get a depth piece or a prospect that's not fully developed to replace Scandella if you trade him?
Sure. Okay. Fair. I don't think that's how it actually came out of your mouth.
I didn't say if we trade him, but I said to replace him. Because I said if we move on from Scandella, do we look to add a depth piece like that, or do we, maybe a guy that's looking for change of scenery candidate,
maybe
to potentially come in, by putting somebody on long-term injured reserve, it does give you potentially a little more cap space.
And this is a thing that we should maybe look into is, are there any teams that are clear sellers that have, defensemen that might be interested, or even better, forwards that are true two-way players, right? Like, I mean, I know, okay, so we're recording this on Wednesday night.
Mm-hmm.
You and I were both at the MLS game last night, or not really MLS, CONCACAF Champions Cup game, the City game last night. And there was a solid 3 minutes where our best striker, Joao Klaus, was playing left back,
mm-hmm.
right? Like, and I do think I have a lot of thoughts on that situation, but like that's what we're talking about, is like being, defending from the front, getting back, helping disrupt. Like, so that way you don't get those overmatches, the number mismatches that happen a lot in hockey. If you get a quick break, like that happens all the time to us because our forwards aren't getting back. And if that's a scheme thing, like where we expect them to be on their own, first off, that would be really dumb. But
It's not a scheme thing. It's the lack of effort from our
right. But
forwards
it's
at
not just
times, right?
Kyrou, right? Right. It's
I
not
said
just Kyrou.
forwards. I'm
Right.
Kyra is the easy person to point a finger at
Right.
because we pay him as much as we do. You expect him to show up and play every day, but it's not. You're right. It's not just Kyra. It's the lazy passes. It's the blatant takeaways. It's the not getting on the forward check so the other team comes flying right back at you while your forwards are skating into the zone. It's
Right.
all of those things. Again, I don't know what it means. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens. And again, I think we'll have a clearer picture by next week. So I'm intrigued to, kind of see where we're at in the standings next week and what that means. I do have one more thing that I didn't put on the outline because it's a question I want to ask you.
Better be an easy one.
There is a former Blues player who just scored their 300. They just scored their 300th goal.
Bullshit.
And is about to play in their 1,000th game. I can never hate saying 1,000th game, but is about to have 1,000 games played in the NHL. Do you know who the player is?
Pat Maroon. Damn, no idea.
He was Blue for a long stretch.
Yeah. No idea.
TJ Oshie just scored his goal number 300 for his career.
Is sitting at 300 goals. Really?
He's coming. Wow. He's getting close to 700 points.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And like I said, he's in 995 games played.
That's wild. Like
so
I remember
just
when
exciting.
he was just like a kid. You know what I mean? Like, we are roughly of an age with TJ Oshie, but like in my mind, like, and he's not the only athlete that's like this for me. Who is it? Oh my God, I can see his face right now.
Who do you play for?
Baseball, Houston. Little Jose Altuve. Jose Altuve, in my mind, is like 25. He's not.
Yeah, no. Altuve to me is old.
Right. Right. And he is for a professional athlete. But in my mind, Jose Altuve is 25 years old.
He broke into that major league. He had a long minor. He broke into the majors at like 25.
Yeah. Well, and the crazy thing is, like, when he broke in, they were like writing articles like Houston 2017 World Series champs ? Predicting things. I think there was a Sports Illustrated cover page. Doesn't matter.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Speaking of Sports Illustrated, they closed up shop, but
supposedly,
no, just exciting
posts on their social media. So I don't know.
They cut ties with, so they had let somebody else essentially keep producing Sports Illustrated under their name, but essentially cut that contract, and so the future of them is essentially is bleak, to say the least.
Bleak.
So TJ Oshie, though, favorite memory of TJ Oshie, and probably a lot of people have this, was in the Olympics against Russia in the shootout.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my God, that was gold.
And not only in the shootout, but his post-game press conference that day, where he was like, "I'm not a real hero. The military is the real hero." Like, I was like, man, you like
tell me he's an American, man, is what he is. He was bleeding red, white, and blue that day.
Yeah. Well, and it's not just that, but it's like sports are really serious, and it's this guy's career, and like there's huge stakes, but at the end of the day, it's a fucking game, right? Like, enjoy it, and just like to be grounded in realism like that. That was something that I've always appreciated from Oshie. I do miss that whole group of guys, though. I think that then.
Yeah, it was. I mean, Chris Stewart and Backus, Oshie. It was really nice to have David Perron back for the Cup run, right? And to have him as a part of that because he was
Yeah.
another one of those guys, right? I mean, those are the guys that turned this franchise back around, and so there's a lot to be said for that.
It's wild that we say that they turned this franchise back around. And I mean, granted, if we're going
Steen's another one, Alexander Steen.
Oh, Alexander Steen. Oh, I forgot about Steen. You think like turn this franchise around, culminating in the Stanley Cup win, and then just like how far I feel like we've fallen since that win, which is all on Army in my mind. But
It can all go back to the fact that he wanted to be I'm bigger than you to Petrangelo, and
that's exactly what
essentially
it is.
tell
That is
Petrangelo to go fuck
root
himself.
of all this fucking shit.
Is he said that, and guess who won another Stanley Cup last year and led his team as a captain? Oh, that's right, Petrangelo.
But hey, you know what though? He did not go on a tear like Maroon did. Pat Maroon went on a real Stanley Cup tear. Legend.
Yeah, we should have brought both of those guys back because Maroon was
just
not
for like
that
yeah.
much.
Yeah,
but
well,
just as a locker room guy.
Yeah, and even in honestly, from a business sense, like being from St. Louis, being on the team that brought the World Cup to
scoring the winning goal to win
scoring
said
the winning
Stanley
goal.
Cup.
Yeah,
it's the David Freese story all over.
Yes.
Except for Maroon's a better player all around than Freese was. Speaking of David Freese, Cardinals are back.
I fucking love that
spring
guy.
Training.
Freese. So okay, apparently he still like walks around like in Texas, and like people will recognize him, which is kind of surprising. But I mean, it was a big World Series, and like I guess like he'll like walk around and like cars will like drive past him and be like, "Fuck you, David Freese." And like apparently he finds it hilarious, which I do too. But yeah, all these years later.
Well, I mean, they finally got their World Series win, so maybe things are better. Do you know there's only one professional sports team, like top level professional sports team, not including MLS, that hasn't won a professional title, like a championship?
I'm going to tell you that I'm pretty sure that's wrong, but please continue.
I said not including MLS.
No, I know. Like even from like MLB,
it's the Texans, the current teams.
Seattle has not won anything. Seattle Mariners have not won anything.
I said from Texas.
No, you did not say from Texas. You said one professional sports team that has not won a title. That's all you said.
From Texas.
From Texas. Okay, that makes sense. Yes, I was like, dude, I can think of like 5 or 6 teams that have not won titles. What are you talking about? Yes,
no,
the Texans
from
have
Texas. Texans have not, but Spurs obviously have. Mavs have. Cowboys have.
Again, we're excluding MLS. Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, excluding MLS. So anytime these stats come out, they always exclude MLS because they still don't consider MLS one of the major sports yet.
But you know what?
But we're coming.
That's changing though, because I'm seeing, there's TV viewership things, there's money related things like, percentage of income spent on whatever bullshit. Because if you're a listener to this pod, I am very interested in sports finance, and you probably already knew that. And I have started over the last year to see MLS included more, and that may be the Messi effect, TM, trademark. Speaking of, did they? I'm going to look it up while we're talking.
They won 2-0. You're fine. I watched the game.
Okay.
While I was doing homework, so.
I'm not surprised. Okay. And and we get to play RSL in 2 days, 3 days. Awesome.
Honestly, if I'm being honest, RSL should have won that game.
Really? I heard they were having a real problem with whatever shitty press Miami gave them, which means that I'm hoping that they're going to have a real problem with the real press on Saturday.
So the issue was that Miami had a lot of issues with RSL's press in the second half.
Really?
And
Question
we
mark.
can talk more after this, but it was
Yeah.
interesting to see in the second half. RSL had a ton of chances and just did not capitalize. Players got selfish when they had wide open players in the
Oh,
back
well,
door, and just stupid things. But it was interesting. In Miami, early in the game was definitely in control, but in the second half got real
yeah.
sloppy real fast, and it was only a 1-0 game at that point.
Right. Okay. Sidebar before we go back to the Cardinals, though, back to the Miami game, though. Like I
Mm-hmm.
saw, did you see the video I sent in the group chat where Messi chips that ball over the injured player into the box to like run up on it? That was just hilarious to me. And I hope that whoever it was that was on the ground is not seriously injured, because obviously we don't want to poke fun at someone who is injured, but still, like come on, like he knew what he was doing when he did that. Like he's like, nah, I got to score this goal. Sorry, you're. They didn't hear no
They
whistle.
haven't whistled it dead yet,
Right.
so
Yeah. Anyway, though,
yeah.
but Cardinals spring training, David Freeze. I am wearing a spring training jersey. Out of curiosity, here's a question for you: what player do you think this jersey is for? I have worn it on the
Spring.
pod before.
When did you get it?
I got this actually from one of my technicians who went to a ton of. He was a huge Cardinals fan
It's
and got this as
Arenado.
a giveaway. It is not Arenado.
Is it Goldie?
It is not. It is a current player on the team, though.
Okay.
Do you want to take
Uh,
another guess, or do you want me to tell you?
I'm going to take two more.
Okay.
If it's Newt Bar, I'm going to be really jealous, so I'm going to throw him out there.
It is not Newbar.
Okay. Then my last random shot in the dark is Michaelis.
No, but I do like Michaelis, but yeah, she had it for a while. He has been off the team for a few years. For the listeners on the audio only versions of this podcast, it is a Matt Carpenter spring training jersey.
John
Warm
slyly
up.
moved his arm into the camera for those of you who missed it. And as he did, he slowly pulled the sleeve open to stretch it out smoothly so you could read the number 13 as he could show us
all about the presentation, guys. Okay, here's the thing. Okay, I've been doing this for a while. I'm a real pro now at this whole videography bullshit. So, I could basically like be live on air. I should do that. Sorry, what you didn't hear was the thoughts in my head where I should be like allowed to call sports games while drinking.
That's been my dream, to like call sports, like be a sports announcer since I was a little kid. It'll
Can we
never
talk about
happen.
no, but can we talk about how great Joey Zanaboni is for the radio announcing for MLS games? And I think he does the ambush too. But like phenomenal. So all those clips you see, they take out whatever bullshit Apple coverage or FS2, and they put him on his radio announcement over it. Phenomenal stuff. Phenomenal. All of it.
Okay. Spring
Cardinals.
training is back, though. Spring training is a wonderful time of the year because it fills us all with ideally hope for what the season's going to bring. But I do want to start off on an interesting note with Nolan Arenado over the weekend. Made some comments around.
Don't get me started. Actually, get me started. Go for it.
Around what was needed from the team. And he did. And I did find this amusing because I made comments early on the podcast about him maybe lacking some areas in leadership. And you're like, that doesn't mean he's not a good fucking leader, etc. But that he needs to be more vocal.
Yes.
And he does. And he admitted as such over the weekend that he needs to be more vocal. And he realizes that the biggest issue with Nolan Arenado, and I'm going to throw this out right now, and I think it's something he realizes after last year and kind of reflecting in the offseason, is he's his own worst enemy. And that he was struggling last year, and I think he was so down on himself, he didn't feel like he could tell any of the other guys what they needed to do.
I mean, he explicitly stated that, so that's exactly what he.
I didn't read the whole quote.
Yeah, no, he explicitly
I didn't know that
states
he went
that
into depth.
Yeah, no, he said there were guys underperforming, and because I was not performing, or et cetera, as well as I should have been, I did not feel comfortable calling other players out. I am very much a lead by example person.
Correct.
And, when you think about the makeup of last year's team, and this is something that I have been just like really excited about 1 week into spring training. And we're going to talk about some of these guys. But, and in fact, I'm going to rearrange your outline because we're going to skip straight to Sonny Gray after this.
Well, it was like the Ollie thing has to do with this Arenado thing, but yeah.
Okay, I don't know what the Ollie thing is, so we can definitely come to that because I'm interested in what that is because my views on Ollie. Anyway, last year's team did not have anyone who historically had been a person who was a very vocal leader. Goldie is not a vocal person. Goldie is like, strong, silent type, right? And Arenado, like, I am a little surprised that he was not more vocal than he is, but he is aware that he should have been more vocal. There are early indications that he is being more vocal. He's calling like fielder position group meetings. He's like doing, like team meetings, talking about like, okay, here's what we're going to do today. Here's what went well during practice. Here's what we need to work on tomorrow. Like he's taking clear steps forward to develop in that way. And I think my thought on what happened. So if you look at last year's entire roster, right, we lose Yachty, right? We have Contreras coming in. There's all the bullshit with Contreras and all the stuff early on in the year, which is its whole own dead horse. But there's no one to be that vocal. The most senior guy on the team is Adam Wainwright, who, let's face it, Adam is the nice guy, right? And that's
not only
why
is he
we
the
love
nice
him.
guy, he wasn't even playing.
Well, that too, yeah. And he's old and he's on his last year and he's just trying to get to his 200th win, and that's really about it, and that's fine. But like you look at the pitching staff, there's not a vocal guy, like a really vocal guy on that pitching staff last year. Now, I will say Miles Michaelis, top tier swag in MLB, I think. But maybe not top tier.
He is a great
tier
clubhouse guy as far as keeping guys, getting guys through a 162 game season. Right. The burger phone, the silly little things that he does, right? Like, so he's a great guy to have in the clubhouse, but he's not your leader.
No. And then you look at the rest of the infield guys. Okay, Contreras is new and had his bullshit. Second base is Gorman, young, or Donovan, young. Shortstop is Paul DeYoung, who's barely, trying to stay on the team, or Edmund, or who's trying to figure out if he's playing shortstop or center field. Then in the outfield, you have Walker, young, and you have Newt, who, like, we fucking love Newt, but he's also just he's the goofball of the group, right? So I don't really buy into Arenado's thing that it was, it was a really young group. No, there was a lot of experience on that roster last year. There was a lot of major league experience. There were some young guys, but there were enough older guys that someone could have and should have stepped up. And it, Arenado probably is the most vocal guy of that group, but he was too busy focused on his own performance, which I get. What that leads me to is, okay, who did we bring in this year? And I know that we did not bring in any, fielders that really mattered. This is Arenado's going to have to step up for the fielders. That's fine. He seems to be doing it.
It's for that piece, and he said it. Goldie said it as well, actually, in an interview yesterday, the day before. They brought in Carpenter to be vocal
Carpenter
piece,
to be that vocal piece, right? Yeah.
But pitchers, we brought in Lance Lynn, we brought in Kyle Gibson, and we brought in Sonny Gray.
Right. So, I can't believe I fucking just showed off the jersey and completely forgot about Matt Carpenter on my little rant there. So, of the pitching staff, okay, Sonny Gray and Lance Lynn are not going to let a fucking thing fly, right? They've obviously got personality. They're obviously fun guys, but they're also there to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so Sonny Gray, I'll admit, my perception of Sonny Gray before he joined the staff is very different than what it is a week in the spring training. Like, very different. So I'm sure that you, like me, follow like pretty much anything Katie Wu publishes because it's all top tier. This podcast, huge Katie Wu fans. But so she did this big long article about, his first bullpen session, right? I'm guessing you have read it. But for those of you who may not have, because it costs money to read The Athletic, which it's totally fucking worth spending the money to read The Athletic. This whole I'm not going to spend money to read a magazine thing blows my mind. So he calls this like essentially not really impromptu, but like surprise. I'm throwing a bullpen session today that people didn't seem to really know about. So everyone's just like watching because it's before he was supposed to throw it. Evan Contreras are doing work. Sonny Gray is just like screaming the quote unquote situation that he's pitching in for each pitch, right? Like, this is the count, this is the batter, this is where I'm aiming, like just screaming. And there's like 20 people watching. And at one point in the middle of that, he delivers a pitch, and I don't know what the pitch was, doesn't matter. Contreras says something like, that was a really nice pitch. And Sonny Gray's response was, no, that was fucking nasty. And that's what our pitching staff has been missing for years. Like, the last person who had that kind of mindset, well, the true last person was probably Lance Lynn about 7-8 years ago. But really, I think of Chris Carpenter with that, right? Like, that is the Chris Carpenter mindset. And now, like, I know Lance Lynn is not going to throw a 2.5 ERA this year, right? He's going to go out and he's going to, throw 6 innings and, only allow 1 or 2, a few runs in and keep us in ball games. And that's great. That's all we need from him. But then, he's going to go out and he's going to also call people out on their shit. And then you're going to have Kyle Gibson be the glue guy doing the exact same thing. I'm excited. I'm concerned about the performance part of it, but I'm excited about the personalities.
I agree with what you said. I think it was interesting to hear the part about Arenado, because I didn't get to that part of his interview, right? About he made the comment and he goes, our clubhouse was kind of overrun by young guys last year. And he goes, I don't mean that in a bad way, but that they need, veteran guys to be able to learn from and to be able to see and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, you're talking about yourself. You're talking about Goldie. You're talking about the guys who needed to step up. And this is why I put Ollie in here, is that...
Oh, yeah. I'm on the same page now.
At what point, if this is what's going on and you're seeing this go on in your clubhouse, does Ollie go to these veteran players and be like, look, I know you're fucking struggling, Nolan, right? I get it. But there is something else you can contribute to this team right now outside of your performance on the diamond that is going to go so much further, right? When does he obviously didn't have that conversation, because if he did, I think the season may have turned, as far as how the position players, Nolan's going to have a different feeling on how the season went, because he was able to help address that. Or Ollie has to be able to do that himself, or his bench coach has to, or whoever. And that's where I think, again, and I've said on this podcast before, we talk a lot about the leadership of Yachty and Pujols. We don't talk enough about the leadership of Skip Schumacher and what we lost when he left, because he's one of those no nonsense, no bullshit kind of guys. If he had seen would have gone to Nolan, would have called the young guys out, be like, hey, you need to do this the right way, or would have gone to some of these older guys. And at least I firmly believe that's what would have happened. So at what point, I don't want to throw this all on Arenado, because Arenado had never had, since he came to the Cardinals, and the Rockies were perennial shitty teams. So he may have been the vocal guy here and there, but he never really had to be a leader, at least not for a team that expected to win. And then he came to the team and he had Yachty. Let's be honest, if Yachty's on your team,
like, you're not with them on the team. You're not the guy.
He never had to be that guy.
Right.
And then nobody's coming to him to help, like, build him up to do that. It's the same thing I see. Again, for those of you who don't know, John and I both work in healthcare, but it's the same thing I see with new leaders in the hospitals. All the time. Right? They promote these people, and then nobody tells them, hey, by the way, you're now the leader. You need to be ready to do X, Y, and Z. And then they get pissed when they're failing. Right.
So here's another thought for you. Here's a question for you, thought up on the fly. Okay, I'm going to probably build to this question. Agree with absolutely everything you just said. But so you and I have talked offline for years about the strategic approach of the Cardinals in terms of
the strategery.
The Cardinal strategery of in terms of what our players, how the team is going to play, right? And so defensively, we're talking weak contact, ground ball pitchers, get the out, right? You
So
throw
you mean not the piss rockets that were flying at our fielders last year?
correct, correct. And at some point that was going to happen, right? And I do think the shift probably hurt us quite a bit last year. Um, and we had to adapt to that, but I don't think it accounts for all of it. But you could have the shift account for some of it, regression account for the others. Doesn't matter. Do you think that if 3 years ago or 2 years ago, however long it's been, we do not fire Mike Schilt, if Mike Schilt was the manager in 2023, do you think we have such a shitty season?
God, no.
No, because Mike Schilt is a people manager, right? The one thing you and I have said constantly since Ali took over is he's fucking up all these situations with the players. He's throwing players under the bus. He's making them to he's calling them out publicly after a situation is resolved, which is what he did with Tyler O'Neill. He did something similar with Harrison Bader. He's, the manager is supposed to be the fucking manager and keeping that other shit going on. Yeah, you need veteran leadership in the clubhouse. You also need a manager to manage.
At this point, part of me wonders, right, if, the Cardinals would have been better off hiring somebody who has zero baseball experience, but knows how to manage people in that role.
I mean, yeah, if you have, I think you could
I say
have,
zero, you know what I mean? But
right. The problem with that from the Cardinals' perspective is I do think we had been severely lacking in the analytics department and again, the fucking nerds, right? And I say that knowing that I'm a data person nerd myself, and I spend a lot of time looking at numbers that may not really matter. But if you combine someone like Mike Schilt, and maybe Mike Schilt is not willing to do some of these things, and that's totally fair. But it wasn't like we had a fully fleshed analytics department to support him that way. And Ali, in his first year in 2022, I think more leaned. He definitely did more analytics-based decision-making than Mike Schilt did. And I mean, you see it in the NFL with Dan Campbell, right? He's very analytics-based, which is surprising for a former player. But you also have to manage the people. Tony La Russa was phenomenal about that when he was with the Cardinals. Not so much with the White Sox, but when he was with the Cardinals, he was great.
He had his fair share of riffs with players. Larissa.
I mean, I'm not saying he didn't have his riffs, but he also he did a good job of balancing managing the game with managing the players.
I think that's why. And you look at Schilt. When Schilt was the manager, who was his bench coach?
It was Ali, wasn't it? Yeah.
You have two
that
styles but two styles, right? Schilt's going to hold them accountable, but Ollie was able to be everybody's friend, right, to an extent. He didn't have to he didn't have to be the bad guy because Schilt could be the bad guy,
right?
And Ollie doesn't still, and maybe he's figured out after last season, but especially at least during last season, did not know how to admit that he was wrong or how to hold people accountable, but hold them accountable in the right way.
So right? My thing, I think his idea of holding people accountable is bitching about them to the media. And don't get me wrong, I agree. I watched that play with Tyler O'Neill. He was not running as fast as Tyler O'Neill can run. Also, Tyler O'Neill has a history of hamstring injuries, and he's probably been told, hey, maybe, we're not saying run slow, but we're saying, don't sprint every single play that you don't have to sprint on.
I think, and there's a whole lot of things that go into it, right? He's trying to hold people accountable. It doesn't know how. He seems to me like he's the classic non-confrontational manager. He won't
He
say anything
does.
to you, to your face, right? Like he's not going to come
Right.
straight to you with his problem, but he's going to tell
Exactly.
everyone else. And then when you question him, then he's going to be like, oh, well, what I really meant was.
Right. I will say this about Ali. This is a positive because I think we are rather hard on him. And I don't think he is as good as this as Mike Schilt. Huge Mike Schilt fan. I'm guessing you are too. Not that he doesn't have his flaws, but I do think that he does a good job of supporting our players when they do things that are called into question. Like not so much the effort things, but like I think back to that scrum we had with the Mets in 22, I think. And
Which
he
is
was
which is surprising because Pete Alonso's a big, strong guy, so I don't know why you'd want to get into a
right.
scrum with the Mets anyway.
When do you think was the
A
last time we made that reference?
couple weeks ago, I made it, and you were like,
Yeah,
"It's been forever."
right.
Yeah.
But like before that, it had been
Oh,
forever.
it had been
It's been
forever.
like
Yeah.
once. Like I think this is like our second reference in 2024.
Mm-hmm.
But he was really supportive of like the things that that Stubby Clapp was doing during that to try to like protect our players, and he was also standing up for Nolan and some of the other guys and why they were getting upset about that, and that is I think a strength of Ali that we don't talk about because I don't think, like you said, I don't think he's confrontational, and I don't think he knows how to privately address issues, like you said. I think you really, really called out the exact issue that he has. All of this to say, how I don't want to say how bad do they have to be, but like at what level this year, like what is the baseline performance that the Cardinals have to do for Ali to keep his job in your mind, and not what you would do that you think Mo will do? Teach me how to mow.
85 wins.
So and then this is not a betting. I'm just like clarifying.
No.
If the
If
Cardinals,
they hit 85 wins but miss the playoffs, I think he
yeah,
keeps his job. I think if they're below that mark, he's got a high probability of being gone.
84 winning season and loses his job, yeah. But I
Schilt
agree.
made the
Like,
playoffs and lost his job. So like let's talk about it.
well, yeah, but he also got into a yelling match with
He
Mo.
also had
So
a philosophical difference.
right, I do
And that
think.
Schilt wanted to win and Mo didn't care. Do you know who Ollie shouldn't have a? Do you know who Ollie should not have?
First off, that is the greatest quote we have had in this entire fucking podcast. They had a philosophical difference where Schilt wanted to win and Mo did not. God bless you. Please continue.
The one person Ollie needs to not be taking advice from on how to handle situations is Mo, and I feel like that's the one person Ollie is taking advice from on. Oh, well, when you talk to the media, just say this.
I think Ali is such a yes man for Mo that he's not I don't think he comes up with anything. I think he's just a figurehead for what Mo wants. And if that's who they want managing the team, that's who they want managing the team. But as a fan, I find that unacceptable. I was much happier with this team when Mike Schilt was manager because I felt like he was a real, true Cardinals manager, like who we are as an organization, who we are as fans. Mike Schilt was reflective of that. And I do like some of the embracing of the new age math analytics stuff that Ali does, but like the people come first. If I can throw an Office reference in here, right? There's this episode where I think it's the episode where Ryan has Michael come to speak at his college business class, and you as a business major, you should really pay attention to what I'm about to say. And Michael said, whatever. Ryan's assertion was that the paper business is going to go under because like everything's digital, blah, blah, blah. We've all heard it. And Michael says, no, Ryan, people, it's about people, and people will never go out of business. And it's the same fucking thing when you're managing a fucking sports team. And by the way, Mom, yes, I say the F word a lot.
I would also like to point out, you kind of went on a tangent there, and you made it make it sound like all I do is business. That's not. I don't know if
You're one
I
of the
would
suits at
consider
the hospital
myself.
now. You're one of the
I don't know
suits.
if I would consider myself a business major ever.
Hey,
Um,
you're taking college classes right now. What is the degree in?
it would be in business.
Yeah, fuck
Um,
off.
what's my highest degree in, John?
You have another degree? I don't remember.
Yeah,
I'm pretty
yeah,
sure this
that's
is
what
the
I
only
thought.
one you have. I
Yeah,
don't question me
this.
on this.
Oh yeah, you don't have any other degrees. You just randomly got a master's.
Right.
You don't have
Working
any
on a
other degrees. You
master's.
just randomly got a doctorate.
Yeah. There we
Oh
go.
wait.
Nailed it.
Oh
Kind of a
shit.
doctor.
Not a real doctor. I said a doctorate. But what's
Almost.
more,
Almost a doctor. Very tongue
you
in
know?
cheek here on this podcast. Please call me
So
Dr. Tyler.
the other thing, because I kind of wanted to make sure I touched on the Ollie thing. You talked about Sonny Gray being, with what he's
The
doing,
guy.
and I put
Yeah.
in the thing, right? He's being the guy, right? But it's not just the bullpen session, right? And how he runs his bullpen session. It's the after the bullpen session telling his catchers, this is what I liked, this is what I didn't like, this is what we need to work on, this is what's wrong. It's not just in the moment. It's okay, after the fact, this is what went well. And then before he starts the next bullpen session, he starts it with, don't forget, this is what we fucked up yesterday. Let's fix it today.
Yeah.
And I think being on the same page with his catchers and being on the same page with his team, and it's going to pay such huge dividends for all of them, but especially somebody like, we have a young catcher on our team, right? And so that's going to be huge for him.
Right. I will say I am really excited for this year because, one, not only is Herrera mashing the summer in the Caribbean League, but, okay, you and I have talked a lot about where the at-bat's going to be for everyone, and that Contreras is going to start transitioning to DH / possibly first base soon-ish. And that Herrera looks like he's ready to take that step. I do think. Let me ask you this: do you think Contreras catches 100 games this year?
I think he's between 85 and 100.
Yeah, that's about what I would say. I would in my mind, it's like between 90 and 95 is the number in my mind that he catches.
On the flip side of that, if he is calling games really, really well, I could see that number jumping to like 120. Like if he is like in sync with pitchers this year,
right? If he's in sync and Herrera struggles, I could see that number going up out of necessity. But I'm excited to see Herrera take that next step, and I'm excited to see him there. And apparently Sonny Gray has been that guy everywhere, but I think, like you said, it's going to be very, very good for Herrera's development. I also wonder for this team, just like, we've made a transition to guys with a better skill set for the pitching staff for the three true outcomes, right? Get strikeouts, minimize walks, minimize home runs. And does the defense improve? And, we have in our fielding staff, we have emphasized guys with good fielding skills. And it was a struggle at times last year. But I do think that we're going to be better defensively than we were last year. I think you couple our pitchers with getting more strikeouts, and you couple that with the defensive skills that our team already has. I think Walker is going to take a big step forward. He's got a whole season under his belt in the outfield. I think Mason Wynn is a fucking stud at shortstop. I have Mason Wynn on my short list for Rookie of the Year for the NL. Obviously, I'm a Cardinals fan, but tell me I'm wrong.
I think that's a good point, right? That was something that I thought, was thinking is what does our defense look like, right? Does it improve this year? Because realistically, we're rolling out the same guys. So if you look at your typical everyday starting, like say right now, who's your best 9, not including a pitcher, right? Mm-hmm. You're going to say Contreras at catcher. Contreras is not a bad defensive catcher.
He could be better, but sure, continue.
If you watch him last year, he was doing more than I've ever seen him do to like block balls in the dirt and do the
Well,
little things.
sure. I mean, compared to when he was with the Cubs, but being a
I'm
defensive
not
catcher is not what he is known for. But continue. That's
correct,
not the
but
point. Continue.
he's not a terrible, like, again, he's not a bad defense. I'm not saying he's the
Yeah,
best, but he's not a
he's
bad defensive catcher.
yeah, he's a perfectly average MLB catcher with that
You
regards.
have you have to think that at first base, Goldie, there's not a big regression at first base defensively. So Goldie's not going to be worse. He's going to
Yeah,
be good.
yeah.
Third base, you feel like Nolan's going to take a step forward back to closer to where he normally is this year. He is a
Right.
couple years
Nolan's going
older,
to be
but
Nolan. Yeah.
you look at second base, and primarily, if I say my best starting lineup is Gorman at DH and Donnie at second base.
I would agree with that.
And then again, like you said, Mason Wynn at shortstop, the range and the athleticism. I think one of the most, for listeners at home, I just started coughing my brains out, but
You're
so I had to
dying.
mute, but
You have pneumonia.
with
Please
Mason
continue.
Wynn, one of Mason Wynn's big things, right? The range he has. You
Oh
mentioned
yeah,
earlier, we lost the
quick
shift.
and he's got an arm. Yeah.
We've had good shortstops that range is limited, and we were able to cover that with the shift. We can't cover that with the shift now.
Yeah.
And so you're going to
Well,
see a lot more errors on somebody like a Mason Wynn or a Nolan Arenado because they're getting to balls that other fielders don't even have a
Right.
chance to.
Well,
and so
and that's
don't
why
just look at errors and assume that they're playing bad.
right. That's why Nolan Arenado is consistently a Gold Glover. And granted, last year was like the first year that he hadn't won it in his position. But like, even though he has more errors nominally than his peers, and it's because he's going for these balls that other guys just don't even try for, right? And the voters recognize that, and he's making these phenomenal plays year in and year out. With them, even with a down year, he had a lot of really good plays last year. I do think that pairing, I'm also very excited because you kept talking about, like you said, with the range of Mason Wynn. I do think he's going to pair very well next to Nolan Arenado, especially as Nolan, I mean, I don't think last year was age getting him. I think it was just a down year. But over the next 3 to 4 years, like, there's going to be deterioration over a 4-year period. I do think hitting wise, Goldie has already hit that deterioration. It's only been 1 year, but like, he's 36. I don't really expect a 36-year-old hitter to suddenly light it up when his 35 year was not as good as it was previously. I think he still can work counts. I think he's going to start losing his slug, and I think that's going to start having an impact on his overall numbers. As far as the outfield goes, I mean, the outfield is for once
So you've got
simple.
So this is, if I say this is my best team, right? And there's some question marks here. And we'll get into that here in a minute. But so I'm going to bring that last bullet point up here in just a minute on our outline, FYI. But you've got Newton left, you have Edman in center, and you've got Walker in right. You don't have questions about Edman's ability to play defense. You don't have questions about Newt's ability at defense. And Walker has to be better this year. For
he was better in the back half compared to the first half.
The amount of work he's put in,
Yeah.
the amount of work he's put in, the amount of work he's going to continue to put in, he's going to continue to progress and get better.
Right. And he was so much better at the end of the season than he was at the beginning of the season. Like, we can actually see progression with him. It's not just like we expected. Like, you could actually see it.
Correct. Yeah. I was like, the numbers showed that he was better across the board. And one of the things that makes me concerned about all of this, right, is you were about to say, our outfield's set for the first time in a while. Tommy Edman's still on limited duty, and we don't know. There's still kind of gray areas on exactly when he'll be ready. Brendan Donovan also had off-season surgery, and Brendan Donovan will be ready by the beginning of the season, assuming there's no crazy setbacks. Is Tommy Edman ready for the start of the season? And if he's not, we have Dylan Carlson as our fourth outfielder. So is that who you put out there? Or do you roll Newt to center and you put Donovan out in left, move Contreras to DH more, and play Gorman at second?
I mean, I think those are all things we will see in the first month. I do think you will see Newt play center field. I do think you will see Carlson play center field. I think you will see Carlson maybe play left field in Edmund's absence, and you'll see kind of like which one's better. I do think as far as, the quote unquote half rest days is kind of what they call them, where a guy DHs and then goes back into like a fielding position the next day. I think you will see them earlier and more frequently with Contreras than you will with the others, especially because depending on what we have to do with Donovan to cover other positions, like if you move Donovan out of second base, well, you have to move Gorman into second base, right? But in theory, wherever you move Donovan, hopefully will be to spot, Arenado from the fielding day or Goldie from a fielding day or whoever, right? But injuries happen. I feel better about our fielding depth than I have in a while. And Donovan is a huge piece of that, provided that, like you said, he has no more setbacks. I do wonder how many more years of Edmund we have before we trade him. I do not think he finishes his initial contract in St. Louis. I do think he will be a tradable player. So I don't know. I think that is a big question mark, but provided he progresses, I think he's on his own hitting program right now, I believe. Edmund is. But he's not been very clear about what the progression will be for that. So we really have no idea what that timeline looks like, or at least from what I've seen.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. I'm not sure what it's going to be, and I was excited in the offseason because I felt like we were finally going to have an outfield that was lined up. Here's my couple of last pieces, that I kind of want to talk about. It is two big things. First, are there any young guys that you're really excited to see, or that you think have either excited to see in spring training / going into the season, or think that have a chance to break camp, and why? And part of this is there's two parts in this, and the other part is Burleson. Is Burleson still fighting for his roster spot? We talked to, so for example, where does Burley play? Because everyone's going to be like, oh, put him in left field, right? Remember how we were talking about, oh, there's a lot of guys who don't have errors because they can't get to balls? Let me show you Alec Burleson. It's really hard to make an error when you're running up on the ball after it's stopped moving every time. And he's not that bad, right? Like I'm over-exaggerating by a lot. But, the guy hits well, but he's a left-handed bat. We have a lot of left-handed bats. And you can never, left-hand bats are good to have, but he's really a DH type. Well, who do you want to be your DH every day?
I mean, I want Gorman to be my DH every day in an ideal world. I'm still thinking about your other question, and I actually was just double-checking who the non-roster invitees were. I do have thoughts, but I'm going to let you continue yours before I start giving some guesses.
So there's two position players I'm very intrigued to see.
Okay, I'm listening.
How they do, and I think pending injuries and how things play out may both have a chance to break camp.
Okay.
The first is Thomas Sagasy.
Yep, absolutely.
I think he's got a good chance to potentially break camp, especially if there's injuries, but he's an infielder, right? He can play all over the diamond on the infield as needed. So, especially if he's lighting it up and playing well, I could very well see him breaking camp to be able to help fill those infield roles, especially if we have to move Donovan to the outfield, because I'd much rather have Donnie in left field than, somebody like Burleson. The other one that I could see, especially if he continues to hit and play well, I'm going to be excited to see him in spring training either way, Victor Scott II. And, he's somebody that I think we will see at some point this year, even if it's for some short call-ups here and there, to due to injury or whatever else. But I think because of the Edman issue, if there's some struggling there, or, and hear me out here, I know people are going to think I'm crazy for saying this, but if Edman's back and healthy, and all of a sudden you turn around and Carlson's forgotten how to hit and it just looks awful, does he potentially push Carlson out of the fourth outfield spot? And Carlson then potentially, because of his defense, would have more playability over Burleson. So then Carlson then pushes Burleson out.
Yeah, I don't think Carlson and Burleson, I would be shocked if either of them had any more, I forget the official term for it right now, but if they can be sent down to
DFAs?
the minors anymore. No, you can DFA anyone.
Assignment?
Yeah, but that's not what I'm talking about, because DFA is basically
you're asking if
player.
He has. Well, you're asking if they have any more minor league options, so where they send them back and forth.
Options is the word I'm thinking.
And so,
of.
Because if they don't, then they have to DFA them, is what which is why I was worried.
Yeah. So they could DFA them, but they obviously don't want to. Carlson, they can't make up their mind if they want to keep him or trade him. Burleson, I don't think has a very big market. I agree 100%. Thomas Sagassi and Victor Scott II are definitely the two guys I think most likely to break camp. I do think Thomas Sagassi is slightly more likely than Victor Scott II, and not because of ability. I think just because of the 40-man construction right now. And I think the positional variability helps him. I do not think he breaks camp, but I think he is more likely to break camp. I do think, as far as pitchers go, Cooper Hjerpe, Tink Hence, Takoa Roby, Gordon Graceffo, I think all of those guys are a great spring training, a good to great spring training away from breaking into the major league team as a reliever. Especially the guys that are lefties, which are Cooper and actually of that group, is it just Cooper Hjerpe at this point? I thought we had more lefties. Because
Michael McCreevy, is he a lefty?
He's a righty for throwing. He bats as a lefty apparently, but he is a righty for throwing. But it's partly because a lot of the guys that were lefties have already they're 40-man rosters, and I'm looking at non-roster invitees.
Thompson, and
Liberatore, yeah. Takoa Roby as well. Is a good camp away from breaking in. I do think that when it comes to the 40-man and the bullpen, I do think that this team has a very situational approach. Who is the guy that's best for this situation? I think they know the situations that they want to have options for, and they're looking for who they have available that fits reacting to those or solving those situations. I think that's going to be the biggest impact, more so than who plays the best in camp out of this group of guys. But yeah, any of those guys I could see breaking through.
I could see any of them breaking camp. I'm excited to see all of them in camp because I want to see what these guys look like against some of the major league pitchers. Michael McGreevy is somebody that I feel like we don't talk or hear about enough, and I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I don't know. I think the whole piece will be interesting. And again, you're some of these guys, right? You're looking at for potential change of pace guys, and change of pace guys should never be underestimated. Look at what Celio Pompeu did last night, right? And came in, was able to get down in the corner, make something happen, put the ball in, and ended up where Kojima scored, right? And so change of pace guys are important, and they can completely change the way that the game is played, or how your team feels at any given moment. And I think Tink Hence is the guy that I think of the most when I think of the change of pace or bringing something different or electric to the team. And is the guy that I most anticipate by the end of the year seeing in the bullpen. But I think they will wait a while to pull him up because these guys, they really want to get starter innings right now so that they can pull him up to the bullpen, get major league experience, see how they do against major league hitting, but then not take away that year of development as a starter.
Absolutely.
And again, we spend a lot of draft picks on these guys, right? Like, and high draft picks or
Yeah.
trading away things.
High draft picks. Yeah.
And, and I know that, some places don't agree, but draft picks are valuable. I think it was a certain employee of Stan Kroenke who said, fuck them picks. And
Fuck them picks.
I don't necessarily agree with that, right? Like, you have to have picks to continue. But that's, continue to be successful. But that's also why Stan Kroenke continues to not be successful, because he's an idiot and continues to be an idiot. And with that, Stan Kroenke, we hate you guys, and good night, everyone.